50,000 gay men on the dance floor with dicks and bums and chests and ammo going up my nose, and I'm being porked. It was the first time I ever heard Love Hangover by Diana Ross.
You just dropped your pants and there was not a condom inside. Well, this is 1981. The only fear in other people's minds was Jodie.
It didn't happen to straight heterosexual women, or unless you're a prostitute or a junkie or, an undesirable. I did not fit that criteria.
It was a joke. It was that gay man's disease. Being HIV positive now and with other HIV positive guys, there's a sense of freedom in that and being able to express yourself and say what feels really good. But again, there's always consequences to everything. So, doctors tried to educate on a healthy lifestyle basis. Any doctor would, HIV specialist or whoever. I'd go and see a doctor tomorrow and he'd tell me to stop smoking, but I won't because I enjoy it. The advertising seems to have stopped, and look, I'm not saying throw it in their faces, but in our community, not just in our gay community, I'm talking about bisexual, heterosexual and others, the conversation seems to have stopped. These days it's more women being infected with bisexual activities. It still amazes me the age of people being affected these days. It's the 18 to 25-year-olds, and when I think about it, AIDS has been around for 30 years. So these kids were just babies when we were rallying on the streets with our candlelight vigils. They were just being born. Some of them weren't even born.
I went through a process quite rationally about not feeling guilty about bareback, and just rather accept that there were risks associated and deal with the consequences of those risks when they arrive. I self-sought into communities that accepted people who wanted to have bareback sex. One of those steps was BB, an online hookup site for people who want to have bareback sex. I was doing 3 months testing. There was an incident where I got freaked out and went to the clinic and got PEP. I had known people who'd been on PEP. I did this month of PEP. They said it was horrendous. But for me, there was no side effect. I found out later that I was on a low-level dose. I wasn't on an aggressive dose because the doctor had determined, because we didn't know the status of the people, and because we didn't know, in fact, if they were HIV, if we would have known, then he would have put me on a stronger dose. I didn't tell the whole truth to the doctor when I went in for the consultation. Guess I was a bit embarrassed that I accepted my reckless, unsafe sex practices.
Eventually this lady turned up and I thought, finally, relief. Unbeknownst to me, she was the head of the clinic. She was rather matronly, but she took me in and I explained why I was there, told her my story. She said the IUD wouldn't be a problem because of the blood clot, asked me about any medications, so I gave her the list. And she said, what's this? She didn't know what the antiviral drugs were. So I explained and said I was HIV positive. And she said, well, I can't treat you then. And I knew exactly why. She didn't want to touch me because of the virus. So I said, why not? And she said, women like you shouldn't even be having sex. So in her mind, I'm this slut, and that's why I've got HIV. And I'm prostituting myself around for God knows what, and I don't deserve to get care. And I thought, damn you!
Very early on, there was a time with my dad. It's stupid, it's a silly thing. We were out fishing and I was drinking a can of Coke and he wouldn't drink out the same can as me. I know it's silly, but it was one of those things where it's my dad. And he wouldn't. There was another time he said something really bad. I cut my fingers on another fishing trip, and this is something that we do together. And so he said, it was just a little bit of blood, and I got it on, it was like just it was a little bit of blood, it was on the metal door frame. And he said something like, "You better clean that up, especially with that shit in your blood," or something like that. And I know he didn't mean it. I know it sounds terrible when I say it. I just think it's the language that he uses, like in general. But I mean, it's like that shit in your blood. I think he just meant you're positive, and we don't want to be leaving that lying around, if you were to use like a bad translator.
He just says, "Do you know anything about HIV?" I said, "Oh yeah, I'd just done this biology course on infectious diseases." So I just start spouting off everything I know. I talk about how you transmit it, how you prevent it, how you protect yourself, and I went on some sort of spiel about where you could go to get more information. And after all of that, and I'm sure I was very accurate about what I said, I don't doubt that, but after all of that, he turns and he says, okay. So if I have sex with my wife and I don't have a cut on my body yet, I should be okay. I'm lost for words. And I then spend the next few hours thinking about how you communicate with someone and touch their heart and their soul and their way of being, and not all just the rational stuff and all the stuff that we know and understand, but it doesn't affect our behaviour. There are a lot of things that stigma is deliberately used for by some people, and that is not going to change. It's a way of controlling society. But I don't want to be pessimistic about it, because actually, one of the biggest changes that we've seen in the context and what I'm most familiar with over the last 10 years surrounding HIV is by naming stigma as one of the most enduring and the most significant barriers to progress around HIV. We're giving people a forum to talk about it, to identify it, and to actually collectively strategize effective ways to try and overcome it. So the end of stigma is not ever really going to be possible, but I don't think that's something to be upset about, because by naming it, by calling a spade, we can then effectively do things, not to end stigma for everybody, but to help people whose lives are directly impacted by it, help them overcome it in their own context.
Darren, my friend, got sick. And it was at his euthanasia at his house with his partner, and his family and his friends were there. And another friend of ours, James, was there. He had full-blown AIDS, and he was emaciated with this bug that he brought back from Greece. The doctors couldn't treat the parasite, they'd never seen it before. And as the doctor was about to administer the drugs that would end Darren's life, that night, The doctor arrived, and we got James into bed, and we all said our goodbyes. I was last. And I said, James, I don't know what to say. Except, you've been the best friend I've ever had. And we left it at that. The doctor said he will say to James, 1, 2, 3, and that on the count of 1, James would take a deep breath and he'd be gone. We knew the drill. We'd been there before, and his sisters were there. He was so close to his sisters. So, the doctor says, 1. We all start to cry. And James pushes himself off the bed and says, would you all fucking shut up? I'm trying to die here. And they were the last words he ever said.
A lot of young gay guys, I think, don't identify with the gay community anymore. There's a sense is that if you're with a group of people, and this is happening now, the friendship groups which are gay accepting, there's no need for them to reach out into the gay community to find what they want. They just continue on. And they don't identify with the gay community anymore. I think this happens much more now with the younger people.
The first thing I think about when I'm giving someone a diagnosis of HIV is the first reaction. It's their personal reaction, how it affects them and their health. But then the next thing straight away after that is associated with stigma. And it's who can they tell or confide in, and that's really important. We actually address that. We tell people not to disclose their status early on to too many people because of stigma.
We forget that often that HIV is just a part of life. It's not the only thing, it's not the whole story, it's just one part of someone's life.
I don't know if I've particularly experienced the harsh end of stigma. I've never, actually I think to be completely honest, I don't think anyone has made me feel particularly bad about being positive. I think I've made myself feel bad about being positive.
No, I try not to let it define me.
I think one of the saddest things that exists for me is seeing how much stigma exists in our own community. And I think that in some ways,
stigma from outside you can understand a bit more and you can rally against it a bit more.
But when it's your own community, I think it's very hard. And I think it's very hard for people who are diagnosed when their own community stigmatises them to the point
where they feel like they can't really talk about it. They can't feel like they can be open about it.